Yes, I would imagine that this is bad news if all we're doing is tweak rates. But let me get Prateek and Mani to comment on the rate changes specifically. Prateek, you know, one of the key changes is carbonated fruit beverages or fruit drink and carbonated beverages with fruit juice will attract GST rate of 28% plus the cess of 12%. Now, you know, how significant is this in terms of impact on the FMCG sector?
I think this is a significant change because there was a lot of ambiguity as to what kind of fruit drinks, and you know the percentage of fruit juice could differ. It could be 5%, it could be 10%, it could be 15%. In what situation, what rate would apply? There was separate rate for fruit juices and pulp at around 12%, then there was 18% with the residual rate, and then 28% for aerated water. Now I think the attempt is being made to harmonize and say that any carbonated drink, irrespective of the percentage of fruit juice, will attract 28 and 12% cess. Brings in some clarity, although what you'll have to see really is that whether they align the definition of carbonated beverages with fruit juice with what we have in FSSAI. Because in FSSAI, there is a certain percentage of fruit juice that they talk about, between 5 to 10% typically. Then it qualifies as this. Yeah. Also, Shireen, globally, governments are encouraging drinks which has more and more fruit sort of content. And therefore, there are countries which has graded VAT or GST rate to say, as the content of fruit is more, you know, the rate would be lower. Of course, India has not embarked on that journey as yet. I think there'll be a substantial impact on FMCG sector. There are a lot of drinks which are there in the market where the lower rate is being applied currently.
Okay, so you see that there will be an impact on FMCG companies on account of this. And it sort of negates what you were just talking about, which is the global direction that governments are taking, which is to incentivize the use of fruit versus carbonated drinks. But Mani, let me ask you about the other rate change, and that is the hike in the GST rate from 5% to 18% on iron, manganese, copper, nickel, cobalt, aluminum, lead, zinc, tin, chromium, ores and concentrates. Now, what will be the significance of this decision? You're on mute,
Okay.
Mani.
Yeah. So some of these changes are actually to correct the inverted duty which had crept into some of the user industries. So not all of them, but some of them clearly have got user industries which are taxed at a lower rate, and therefore it was necessary to increase them. Now, at a broad level, if you look at the items on which it has gone up, all the metal-related items, none of them are typically end-use items which consumers use. And therefore, there is a process of a value-added chain through which all of these flow through before the final product goes to the consumer. And therefore, to a very large extent, whether it is 5 or 18, I would say possibly in 80% cases, the buyer of it would be getting the input tax credit. To that extent, this decision would remain cost neutral. There would be a few industries where the eventual use of these metals results in the manufacture of an item which could be exempt subject to certain very specific conditions. There we would have to see an impact. But just one point here on the subject of the frequent changes, while we shouldn't certainly be having the kind of changes that we are seeing, and as Mr. Rohan Shah mentioned, we are actually seeing something like a union budget each time this happens. But let us also be mindful of the fact that if there is a certain sector or a certain industry which needs certain relief, which is being taxed at a rate which is causing a difficulty or distress in that particular industry, possibly we now have a forum which can provide that relief quicker. They don't need to necessarily wait till the union budget of the next year, and the relief after an evaluation by the Fitment Committee and after a discussion can be provided earlier also. So while it is not desirable that we keep tinkering with rates, in certain cases and depending on the specific situation, this is also providing an immediate relief to certain sectors which possibly should not be waiting for too long.
Yeah, I get the point that you're making that, in terms of course correction, if needed, the council should take up these issues, whether it's inverted duties or otherwise. As Timsy was pointing out, some of the other decisions taken, levying an 18% GST on paper sacks. Mr. Najib Shah, again, to the point that Pratik was making, one would hope that you would incentivize the use of paper sacks, for instance. Why would we actually see a hike in the rate there?
I won't be able to hazard a guess, except again, if they're thinking of correcting a structure which is otherwise inverted, I would not like to hazard a guess because I really have not seen the details of this particular rate increase.
Sure. Let me then address the crucial issue, which is the elephant in the room that was not taken up by the council, and which really is the inclusion of petroleum products under the GST ambit. Let's address the ATF issue. A senior government official that I was speaking with, said that, look, states have nothing to lose if they were to give up VAT on ATF. And apparently the total sort of national collection on account of VAT is minuscule in comparison to the size of the problem that we're talking about. What do you think, Mr. Shah? Why do we drag our feet on something like ATF, for instance? Would it really make a difference to the centre and the state if this were to move under the GST?
I would think that by bringing in the ATF, they fear that it will be the beginning of bringing in all other petroleum products, because I really can't think of any other ATF impacts only a few states, Maharashtra, the Union Territory of Delhi, the major airports where fueling and refueling takes place. So I would really believe that the fear is only that, because otherwise it is a major step forward, a signal that we are interested in discussing this issue, and we don't have to run into and rush into taking a decision, but at least a movement would have taken place, and it would have been a wonderful signal for the industry, and also prepare the states going forward to look at how we can expand the base of tax, ensure that there's no evasion, to make up for the possible loss which the inclusion of petroleum products will bring to the revenues. Like I mentioned, it's not as if they're going to lose all the revenue. They will still be getting revenue, not as much as they're getting right now, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah, but that has come to pass. Pratik, I want to come to you now on, at this point in time, if you look at the rate revisions or some of the other changes when it comes to things like Aadhaar, etc., it doesn't seem like this is going to end in any significant, meaningful way. And the expectation was that this GST Council meeting, since it was the first since the start of the COVID pandemic, the first face-to-face meeting, etc., would have perhaps taken on some of the larger issues. But that has come to pass.
Yes, on the rate change, Shireen, I would have expected, and maybe in the next GST Council, a discussion on the rate rationalization at an overall level, right? So there is a discussion between 5, 12, 18, and 28. You merge it into a 3-rate structure, which Finance Commission also said. Unfortunately, there's no discussion which happened on that. I'm not too disappointed with the rate changes, by the way. 2 things which I like to highlight. One is COVID cess of 1% Sikkim. They've not accepted, which is good move, because after Kerala imposed a cess some time back, there was a fear that other states might also kind of bring in something similar, and then that defeats the purpose of one nation, one tax. That's one point. The second, on coconut oil, right? I mean, there was a discussion that, based on the size of the pack, etc., the rate could, differential rate could apply.
Yes.
And I think GST Council has said that this requires further study, and they've kept that on hold. And that brings me to the first point that you raised, that in spite of Fitment Committee, why does it need to go to GST Council? Because at some point in time, GST Council also looks at the social side of it, the impact on the end customer, and so on and so forth, beyond the pure play sort of economics of it, right? And I think that's important for the GST Council to look at. So I agree. I mean, these rate changes, most of it seem ad hoc at this point in time. And a larger discussion about the rate rationalization should happen, hopefully, in the next GST Council meeting.
But gentlemen, we will take a break and return to get your final comments after this very short break. Stay on with us. You're watching the GST Centimeter.